Hello everyone, here's another story for you. This one is called Cops and Robbers by Janet and Allan Ahlberg. Here are the cops of London town, hard-working, brave and true. They drink their tea, stay up till 3 and take good care of you. Here are the robbers of London town with crowbars and skeleton keys. They prowl and creep when you're asleep and take whatever they please. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho. The worst of the robbers, as most of us know, is dreadful Grabber Dan. His voice is gruff and he's pinched enough stuff to fill a furniture van. His mates in the gang are Snatcher Jack and baby-faced Billy the Bag, Peg-leg Horace, Fingers Morris and villainous Grandma Swag. This dreadful, snatching, pilfering bunch would rob a baby of his lunch. This sneaking, creeping, fingering lot would burgle a burglar like as not. This peg-legged, baby-faced, villainous crew would pick the pocket of a kangaroo. Now we hear there's worse to come, for the robbers are planning, the scallywag scum, to make a haul on Christmas Eve of all the toys that they can thieve. Like crooked Santas they'll creep about, pinching presents, not giving them out. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho. The best of the cops, by common consent, is upstanding Officer Pugh. He can run like a hare and fight like a bear, and he's good at crosswords too. So on Christmas Eve, when the trouble began, the station sergeant said, "The thing to do is to send for Pugh. He'll get 'em alive or dead." "Listen, Pugh," said the sergeant, "the problem is this. There are toys going missing galore. From the size of the job, we suspect it's a mob. What they need's the strong arm of the law." Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho. Meanwhile, outside in the gloomy street, the strong arm of the robbers was working a treat, and the strong leg too, and the beady eye, keeping watch for passers-by. In at the windows, in at the doors, down the chimneys, under the floors. Through silent rooms the robbers crept, while in their beds the children slept, dreaming of Santa Claus and snow and what they'd get from Uncle Joe. They never knew that Uncle Morris was robbing them, and Uncle Horace. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho. The lookout man was Snatcher Jack. He stood in a doorway yawning, but when Officer Pugh came into view, Jack saw him and whistled a warning. Grandma Snag, when the warning came, was pushing a pram up the road. It was piled high with loot, and stolen to boot, a thoroughly villainous load. "Hello, hello," said Officer Pugh. "Now then, what's going on here?" "Not much, young man," said the criminal Gran. "We're just having a robbery, dear." Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho. Before Officer Pugh could unravel this clue, the robbers were on him like beasts from a zoo. They knocked off his helmet and rumpled his tie, trod on his truncheon, kicked mud in his eye, pulled his ears and tickled his feet, threw half of his clothes all over the street, punched and pummeled him, wham, bam, slam, even ran over him with the pram. Give up, the robbers cried, as they sat on the officer side by side. "We've got you outnumbered 5-1, for in the confusion Grandma had gone." But Officer Pugh just shook his head. "We've hardly started, boys," he said, and he laughed a laugh and grinned a grin. "Sitting comfortably, are you? Then I'll begin." With a sudden leap he bounded free and handcuffed Horace to a nearby tree, tied Morris up in an empty sack and beat the daylights out of Jack. "Help!" shouted Billy. "This can't be fair. That Pugh's not human. He fights like a bear. My mother was right. Crime doesn't pay." And with these words he fainted away. Grabber Dan was the last to cop it, Grandma, of course, having chosen to hop it. Dan tried to hide, the officer sought him. Dan tried to run, the officer caught him. Dan went to lift Pugh over his head. The officer lifted Dan instead and swirled him around and swung him, whoosh, across the road and into a bush. Down he tumbled, skidded and rolled, hit a concrete gnome and was knocked out cold. Pugh dusted his hands and sat on the wall. A little snow had begun to fall. He looked at the gnome and patted its head. "You could get a medal for this," he said. Ho, ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho. Here are the cops of London town, in the station at 2:30. They drink their beer and raise a cheer for upstanding Officer Pugh. Here are the robbers of London town, in cells all gloomy and grim. Let us out, not guilty," they shout, and "It wasn't me, it was him." Ho, ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho. And the toys? Oh, they were taken back by a Santa Claus copper with a Santa Claus sack, while the rest of the force searched day and night for an elderly lady of medium height, with a fondness for earrings and red fox furs, and a habit of taking what wasn't hers. She usually carried a sizable bag, and her name, of course, was Grandma Swag. Ho, ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho.